Okay, thankfully we've got 20 minutes. They originally told us we had 10, and I'm going to have to talk really fast. Mark,
Greg.
thanks for being with us. You and I have talked about this subject for years. I've always found you to be completely forthright and honest, and I know you're going to be the same way today. So I'm just going to ask you the questions, knowing you're not going to give me the canned CEO corporate answer, even when the questions get hard.
No BS. Go ahead.
Okay. So you've been staffing up Console Connect heavily now, really blitzing, much more heavily in the past year than I've ever seen. You want to briefly explain what the value of Console Connect is for your ecosystem partners, the people who are able to buy and sell on the platform?
Okay, well, the basic history, we acquired Console Connect at the end of 2017. It was developing a good plan for network as a service, and most importantly, to, at that time, bypass the internet and give direct connection to cloud. We quickly saw that actually, instead of us thinking as a network-based telco environment that we're acquiring Console Connect, we should completely revamp our thought process. And Console Connect, as I've said many times in public forums, really were the ones to acquire PCCW Global. And from that point forward, we moved a lot of things organizationally as well. Not so much staffing up there, but actually reshaping the way we think, integrating our network engineers with our software engineers, and making sure that the technology team that led software would be the teams that lead. As a result, we put layer 2, layer 3 underneath the software technology development side of the house. They became the lead environment. And we created an organizational framework inside our house for all of PCCW Global, which at the time more than 1,200 employees, to understand that we would become technology-led, and we implemented an agile workflow, specifically one called SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework, which we've been deploying regularly with tremendous amounts of training throughout the world for all of our teams since that time. Meantime, the feature set of Console Connect has evolved, as we demonstrated to you earlier this week with the team, and we have assured that, number one, Console Connect is able to deliver still, as it was originally designed, direct connect to cloud. Second, that it's able to facilitate any self-provisioning of a network for a user that has a port connected to Console Connect. And third, that any 2 users or 3 users that are connected in the Console Connect environment can connect to one another. And all of that can happen without our personal engagement. User does that on their own. In addition, we've been adding a number of features along the way. I think one of the most exciting ones is the ability for enterprises to provision internet on demand. That means that instead of going to a salesperson and checking is there network availability, et cetera, a user can simply go on, network engineer preferably, order up IP addressing range, provided they have that Console Connect port, and immediately have IP delivered to them as if they were an ISP, onward for their own users, and we can do that in less than a few minutes. And that is a big shift in what's happening. And so we're starting to see a lot of traction on how that's going. Users are signing up to the platform regularly. And I would say that this last month was exciting for us because for the first time, the number of ports that had been provisioned by PCCW Global Console Connect on the automated framework exceeded the number of ports that we had provisioned manually for many, many years previously. It was a really exciting move.
You just sort of to give people some idea of the scale that you've been able to create. How many carrier partners have you got? Total number of ports that are available, and then after that, what's coming next in terms of building connectivity and that sort of thing?
Okay, so first of all, we're taking the view, perhaps counterintuitively, to some of the investment bankers that I've been meeting here at the PTC, who are interested in perhaps disintermediating specific value segments in the ICT value chain. We've taken a little bit more of a view that would perhaps arguably be aligned, and I understand the differential in size, to the previous speaker from Meta, which is more of a vertical integration approach. We've always been involved anyway in the layer 1 subsea and terrestrial environment, and we have for many years managed one of the top 10 peered networks both for V4 and for V6 globally on the IP side. And now having the fabric that is able to facilitate that, we effectively became, I think today, probably the only network that has both a platform and the only platform that has a network. And that allows us then to do a number of things, but as you say, not without mass. Importantly, we had to go and establish a large number of data center relationships because the first port of access, so to speak, the physical on-ramp, off-ramp is at the data center. We now have approximately 850 data centers that are enabled. This is integrated together with about 150 traditional points of presence that we have, both on the layer 1 network that we manage globally and on the layer 2-3 network that we manage globally. The number of data center enabled locations will grow over 1,000 during the course of 2023, I hope in the first half, but we'll see how that goes. In addition, historically, we were one of the first innovators from the manual process of creating physical NNI relationships to bilaterally deliver various services over layer 2 or layer 3. All of those relationships now have been facilitated as automated. Not every one of those partners has yet concluded with us the contractual agreement plus couple the technology APIs, but the network and the technology all facilitates it, and we're doing that increasingly, to the point also that we're beginning the process of even automating order entry for local loops that can get into that from buildings in environments where we have NNIs and or where we are regulatorily approved. And I think so all of that gives us all the tools. The network is significant globally. From a fiber point of view today, close to 800,000 kilometers of fiber, and I gave you the number of POPs in the data centers, and it will continue to grow.
You know, I've been in the telecom business for like pretty much 40 years now, which I hate to admit, but it's pretty much 40 years. And at one level, I would say I've been hearing about automation, bandwidth on demand, liquid operations, zero-touch operations for all of those 40 years. So some people may be listening and thinking, well, you know, I agree with everything you're saying, and this is really a good thing to do, but there are other implications, like, for example, bad debt, settlement. How does the platform help you with cutting bad debt and then speeding up your settlement process and eliminating all the paperwork and the fax machines and all that stuff we used to do?
Yeah, fax machines I don't think we use anymore, but maybe one or two. By the way, we had a wake for Telex back in 2014. It was a lot of fun. You would have enjoyed. But I think that what you're calling liquid, zero touch, and so on is basically saying, okay, how do you approach the business starting from the user and work your way back through all the systems? When I first got into the telecommunications sector, it was in cable TV in the 80s. One of the early inventors of cable, or early engineer developers of cable TV in North America and Canada, a gentleman named Sruki Switzer, who recently passed away, said to me, Mark, you can design a cable TV. He was training me first time. I said, you can design a cable TV system from the head end out to the user, or you can design the system from the TV back into the head end. He says, and everybody does it from the head end out. I do it from the TV back to the head end. It's fascinating, and I've carried that with me for 35 years. I'm not 40, 35. So I think that what we have here is that we've started from the user. How does the user want to have that interface? And bear in mind that when we first did Console Connect and we did the acquisition, they were dealing with the resources that they had in order to bypass the internet to get direct connect to the infrastructure as a service known as cloud. And here we said, but here we're handing you a global network. What can you do with it? And bear in mind, we want to start from the user and make sure that everything's there. And the processes that they evolved, that our teams evolved over the last 4 years, assured that the moment the user goes in order to provision any of those services that I just mentioned, they're working themselves all the way through a set of automated processes that get from the front end user interface of how an enterprise network architect or engineer or provisioning entity wants to see, all the way through to the BSS and OSS environments. And that's fascinating, and that's been hard work. You asked about the settlement, billing, and credit and so on. We do, obviously, there are moments of physical connectivity. When a user wants to order a port, there has to be a provisioning process that takes place, a cross-connect in a data center. We have an operations team that's focused on 2 areas alone. Number one, a user that comes onto the environment to assure that we can have a finance structure that will deliver a credit check on the user and make sure that we're delivering that as quickly as possible. And simultaneously, begin the process with the data center and or the local loop provider to assure that the physical provisioning takes place. And once that physical activity is confirmed together with the credit check, and we aspire to do that in very, very short time if we can, and that's why we have an operations team just focused on that those two manual behavior processes, and then flip the switch, and then it's all up to the user. And everything is done through that. Now, there is a piece also, obviously, that when we're working with a third-party provider, whether it be a data center or an NNI network provider, that there's going to have to be financial settlement that takes place. Here we have teams that are working on distributed ledger capability, blockchain-based environments, in order to facilitate that. We won some awards at the end of 2022 in that space for work that we're doing together with Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, and Colt. And I think that we're also leading an effort which we refer to in the industry as C-band. And I'll use this as a moment to say that we're going to attempt to convert the structure that we have in Singapore around C-band into a DAO, a distributed automated organization, that will facilitate tokenization with fiat-based currency to assure that we can get to even automated settlement amongst the ICT providers and the adjacencies, which I see mostly in the application space, in order to deliver that automated settlement component, which I admit that's an area that still has work to do, but I'm really excited about what we achieved in production with Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, and Colt around bandwidth settlement, which is a little bit different than the bandwidth on demand that we provide to users. We're still half a step away from putting those two pieces together, but I think that we'll get there shortly.
Okay, I want to shift it a little bit because over the last 20 years, off and on, when speaking to carrier audiences, service provider audiences, particularly those with local loop facilities, I've started out with a question. And the question has been, I'm going to ask you about two different business models, and I'm going to ask you which one you think is the better business model, if you could do it. So the first business model is, I have a license from a government to operate a network in a certain geographic area, and I create services, and I sell them to the people who live in that geographic area. So option B is, I have many licenses all over the place, and I can sell products that are actually on networks that I actually don't own. Which would you rather have? And I just simply sit back and let them think about it. And 20 years ago, for most people, it was a crazy question. Well, we can't sell those products, and how does that relate to what you're doing?
It does. The question goes into a lot of areas which we work on quite a bit. We listened to a representative of one of the larger content providers just a moment ago, Meta, and obviously the clouds, but Meta isn't that engaged at the moment in enterprise services in terms of infrastructure as a service. But if I were to look at other clouds such as AWS, Google Cloud in China, Alibaba, et cetera, Aliyun, I think that there you're seeing them delivering infrastructure as a service, interestingly, in an unregulated manner. In other words, they have some sort of, they take the view that the services that they deliver don't require to be regulated. And so you have to ask yourself a question whether cloud-based infrastructure as a service should or should not be regulated in order to do that. Now I come to your question, and I tell you that even if I were to give you an answer, I'll tell you that there are others that actually look at the best of both worlds, not having to deal with the regulatory requirements of a jurisdictional government and those and to deliver services ubiquitously regardless. My view is that eventually regulators are also going to find themselves aiming at the enterprise-based delivery of services that we're seeing in the cloud space. And my view is that it is possible for us, in terms of what we're doing, is to build a global infrastructure that can be automated and delivered ubiquitously. And we can do that together with like-minded service providers who are regulated in their jurisdictions in order to create a common platform of value for an end user that delivers ubiquitous services. It's a long sentence to say, I'm okay with both. And the key is, how do you automate to the end user, and how do you automate the relationships with the adjacencies that help deliver that ubiquity? And I think that we're clear on both of them. And I think that in that regard, our clarity of thought is meaningful and arguably giving for a momentary value as compared to where others are in the market. I would expect that others will get to where we are in the not too distant future.
I believe you once told me, probably 2 years ago, that what you're seeing is sales that are being made to customers that you've never seen, actually don't know, but the transaction's been cleared, the provisioning orders have gone out, funds are secured, and that's one of the advantages of the platform for both you and every other member of your ecosystem.
Yeah. Here you're answering your previous question about organizational behavior. And historically, when we were a manually provisioned environment in the network infrastructure, like many, we would have a global sales force that would go about and deliver value. Many times, our salespeople were quite tenacious, and we would challenge them or incentivize them to be tenacious. And they'd go out and they'd find opportunity, then they'd bring it back to the center, to the product house, to the engineering house, and they say, okay, how can we form up to deliver this value that the user specifically has defined for us? Now, hold that thought. With Console Connect and automating the environment in so many different feature sets, we have a centralized, uniform, ubiquitous product environment being delivered to end users directly. So arguably, you're at cross purposes, right? And so how do you make sure that the organizations are able, this organization that's used to delivering from the out in, with bespoke capabilities, and this organization which is online, product-oriented, delivering a common value to as many entities as possible, as widely as possible, arguably without the necessity for salespersons to help fill out a form and to do whatever it is. And that is an operational and organizational challenge, which I enjoy. Because I think there's value in both areas, and we have to learn how to work with it. The latest approach is to try and encourage our sales colleagues to focus on verticals of value. Verticals, not just enterprises like saying, oh, let's look at pharma IT, and can we get BioNTech and Pfizer to each take a port and then interconnect to one another. But verticals may be perhaps of application-based value. For instance, Cloudflare has an NNI to our environment, and you're able to provision a Cloudflare instance on an automated basis through Console Connect. That's a vertical of interest. In other words, how do you create community of verticals, so to speak, in order to do that? And we're trying to encourage the salespeople to focus now not on delivering an order form of a bespoke requirement, but rather to create interest for communities of value. And I think we're having some success there because we're seeing a network effect starting to evolve, particularly on the automated side. Our pace of growth, without me getting into the specifics in the public forum, has actually increased in the last year and a half, literally week on week on week. Instead of, as the numbers grow, one might argue, oh, so then the percentage of growth might decline because actually the percentage continues to grow, week on week. And I'm very encouraged about that. I think that we are still a far ways away from delivering on the full network effect value. I hope that I'll be able to establish some additional financial resources to help the teams get the messages out more aggressively and to execute into new communities of value that we hadn't perhaps previously considered. But the moment you allow from the central out, which is what we're talking, you actually open up your range of opportunity far wider. And I think that's our objective.
Yeah. The thing that I always like to do is follow the money. I have found in my career that you always win when you follow the money. And one of the things that I found astounding about this is that all of us worry about profit margins in this business, especially in the connectivity business. I mean, that's all I've heard for 25 years is margins going like this. On Console Connect, and without mentioning the specific numbers, I'm seeing 3-digit % profit margins, right? Gross profit.
I'm not going to go into percentages of profit margins. I'm not going to say yes, no. What I will say is the following. A key element of what the platform provides is to allow a user to procure services on a de facto on-demand basis. That means that instead of now signing a contract as we used to do for a year or for 2 years or for 3 years, now a user can sign a contract for a day. It's not a contract, it's just going online, clicking to T's and C's and going, do a day, a week, a month, a year, or multiples thereof. The shorter the time period that's done, the unit of value in which we offer the thing is greater. The total cost to the user is less because they're only taking up what they actually need at that time. But if we can get to the point where we are filling our pipes correctly with more of the intermittent usage as opposed to the long-term 2-year, 3-year, which is very commoditized and competitive, I think that we have indications that that will be impacting from a margin value perspective.
Right. So what you're able to do today is if somebody wants a certain amount of bandwidth between one location and another, or between 3 locations, and I only need it for 60 minutes on Tuesday.
We can, the systems do allow us to go down to the minute, but at the moment we've cut it to a day. In other words, the smallest unit of value is 24 hours at the moment. Although we know how to do less, for marketing reasons, we're doing day, week, month, year. But yes.
And then over a period of time, I'm guessing it's going to get more granular.
That is our expectation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that we want to do with that, and we have a lot of work yet to go, and we're going one step at a time.
Okay.
But yes, that is the direction.
Now, one of the interesting things about what you're doing, and as you know, the thing that's always intrigued me about what you're doing is actually not the value for the partners that are on the platform, but what it means for an entity in our business to literally create a platform business model. And you know, as you know, we're not talking about the computer model where it's a platform is hardware or software upon which other hardware and software runs. By that definition, everyone's a platform. But we do hear people sort of casually throwing around the term platform. As a business model platform, deep structure, eventually, what would it mean for Console Connect? If you really can grow it the way that you want to see it.
Well, platform economics, I think, certainly digital platform economics is the order of the day today. Anywhere that, you know, no difference. Amazon, if you will, is probably the most well-known, but they're out there. And arguably, we've been doing platform economics even in our manual days when we had MPLS and NI relationships, and we were able to take an enterprise using a service provider in South Africa that was connected to the network and provision it somewhere else, and we had buy-sell that was going on. But now we're automating that. We have automated that. And so the network effect so there's 2 levels of that platform economics. Number 1 is that one user is able to interconnect with another user, provided they're both enabled on the platform. And so we're going to be seeing value from both sides, a 2-ended economic model, which we are seeing already. And the next layer of that is the service provider or applications adjacency relationships that we would have on the supply lines, which is that suppliers of applications, whether they be UCaaS or security, which you already have on what we call the meeting place, which is an environment that facilitates that, are able to also access that platform in order to engage with their users, treating us either as a channel or as just an environment in order to facilitate that structure. So the platform economics is at the user level and also at the supply level. And digitally enabling the platform economics, which is what networks have been doing, those that interoperate, not the clouds that choose sometimes not to, but certainly service providers that interoperate. I think that's been around for a while. The trick now has been, why haven't we digitally automated that capability all the way through the life cycle? And that's where we're at now.
Well, it appears, Mark, that we are out of time. I could go on for about 2 more hours, as you well know. But thank you so much for giving us your views. Frank, as always.
It's great chatting with you, Gary. Thanks very much. Take care.
Wonderful. Thank